First comment gets a shout-out next video.
Watts' mistress, Nichol Kessinger, blowing him kisses and professing her love for him.
I am having a wonderful time. You mean a lot to me, and I'm glad that you're having a blast. I am so out of breath.
The video, recorded just weeks before Watts murdered his wife and 2 daughters.
There's photos and videos of them on a secret trip to the Great Sand Dunes while Shanann and Chris's 2 baby girls were away on vacation.
There you go, baby.
That's Watts you hear behind the camera.
You're so damn sexy.
HLN also obtained voicemail messages Nichol Kessinger left for Watts. She giggles like a schoolgirl.
Hi. It's me. I miss your face. I was just calling to say hi.
Watts also took these provocative photos of his 30-year-old co-worker. He stored them in a hidden folder on his smartphone.
He hides this on an app called Secret Calculator. It looks and functions like a regular calculator, but when you enter 4 digits, it's a secret vault. It opens up and it reveals hidden photos and videos.
Watts claims he came clean about the affair to his pregnant wife Shanann the night he killed her and their daughters. He buried Shanann in a shallow grave and dumped his girls in silos of crude oil. The mistress told cops she had no idea he was planning to murder his family.
This shocked me just as much as I think it shocked the rest of them.
The house on Saratoga Trail looked quiet that morning, too quiet. A pregnant woman and her 2 little girls had vanished. Their beds were empty. Their shoes were still by the door. Their blankets were folded. Nothing looked forced. Nothing looked broken. But something was wrong. By nightfall, the world would know the name Chris Watts. And in the days that followed, the horror would unravel fast. A husband on television begging for his family to come home. A calm voice. No tears. No panic. Just a strange stillness that made people uneasy. Then came the confession. Shanann Watts was dead. Bella and Celeste were dead. The case officially was closed. Chris Watts pleaded guilty. No trial, no drawn-out courtroom drama, just life in prison. But for many people watching from the outside, something didn't sit right. Because there was another name woven into the story. Nichol Kessinger. The coworker, the girlfriend, the woman Chris was seeing while his pregnant wife was still alive, the woman who searched wedding dresses online, the woman who Googled Shanann months before the murders, the woman whose phone records, deleted messages, and late-night calls became fuel for endless online theories. Officially, she was never charged with anything. Authorities stated there was no evidence she helped plan or commit the murders. She cooperated. She spoke to investigators. She handed over information. And that should have been the end of it. But for some, it was. Because questions started piling up. Why were certain searches deleted? Why did some messages disappear? Why did timelines feel blurry? Why did investigators move so quickly toward a plea deal instead of pushing every loose end into the light of a courtroom? Rumors spread fast. Online communities dissected every police document, every call log, every interview clip. Some believed she was just a woman who fell for a liar. Others believed something bigger was hiding in plain sight. Was she simply in the wrong place at the worst possible time? Or was she the biggest question mark in a case the world thought was already solved? This is where the official story ends, and the speculation begins. In the next chapter, we step back and look at the full picture. The marriage, the affair, the pressure building behind closed doors, and the warning signs that many believe were ignored. If you want the full breakdown, like this video, comment your thoughts below and subscribe to Crime Decoder. First comment gets pinned. Because once you start pulling on this thread, it doesn't stop unraveling. Before the headlines, before the prison sentence, before the rumors, there was a marriage that, from the outside, looked almost perfect. Shanann Watts built her life online. She shared everything: her home, her children, her pregnancy, her struggles, her victories. To many, she was driven, organized, full of energy. She loved her girls loudly and publicly. Bella and Celeste were her world, and another baby boy was on the way. Chris Watts appeared quieter, reserved, soft-spoken. In videos, he smiled politely. He played the supportive husband. He looked like the steady one, the calm presence behind the camera. But behind that image, something was shifting. Financial stress weighed heavily on the family. A previous bankruptcy, mortgage pressure, credit cards stacking up, appearances maintained online while private tension grew in silence. Shanann was often traveling for work. Chris stayed home with the girls. Distance crept in slowly. Then came Nichol Kessinger, a coworker at Anadarko Petroleum, educated, independent, no children. According to police documents, she and Chris began seeing each other in the summer of 2018. What started as casual lunches turned into something deeper. They went on dates. They talked about the future. Chris told her his marriage was ending. He painted a picture of separation and fresh starts. And this is where the red flags begin. Phone records show long calls late at night, some lasting over an hour, sometimes right after Shanann and the girls were asleep, sometimes when Shanann was out of town. There were Google searches, some ordinary, some that raised eyebrows online. Searches about Shanann months before the murders, searches about wedding dresses, searches about how much Amber Frey made from book deals, the mistress connected to Scott Peterson. Now none of this proves involvement in a crime. That's important. Curiosity is not guilt. Searching something does not make someone a killer. But to online communities, these details felt unsettling. Then there were deleted messages. Kessinger admitted she deleted texts between her and Chris after learning about Shannon's disappearance. She said she panicked. She didn't want her private life exposed. Investigators recovered many of those messages through digital forensics, but the fact they were deleted became fuel for suspicion. Why erase anything if you have nothing to hide? That question echoed everywhere. Meanwhile, Chris was telling Nichol he was finalizing a separation. He was searching for apartments, talking about selling the house, painting a life where Shanann and the kids were already stepping aside. Was he lying to her? Was she believing him? Or was something darker building beneath those late-night conversations? By the time Shanann returned from her business trip in Arizona on August 13, 2018, the clock was ticking. Tension was thick. The marriage was cracking in plain sight. And within hours of her landing, everything would change. In the next chapter, we move into the final 48 hours. The night Shanann walked into her home for the last time, the morning her friends realized something was wrong, and the cracks in Chris Watts' story that began to show almost immediately. If you're still with me, like the video, drop your theory in the comments and subscribe to Crime Decoder. Share this with someone who followed the Watts case. Because the deeper we go, the more complicated it becomes. Shanann Watts walked into her home just after 2 a.m. Security footage shows her dragging her suitcase up the driveway, exhausted from her business trip to Arizona. She was 15 weeks pregnant. She had meetings in the morning. She expected a normal day. It would be the last time anyone saw her alive. By sunrise, Chris Watts was awake. He later claimed they had an emotional conversation about separating. He said it was calm, honest, final, but there is no recording of that moment, no witnesses, only his version. What we do know is this. By 8 a.m., Shanann had missed a doctor's appointment. She wasn't answering her phone. That was unlike her. Her friend Nicole Atkinson knew something was wrong almost immediately. By early afternoon, police were at the house. Chris returned home from work to find officers waiting. Bodycam footage captured everything. His nervous packing, his hands on his head, his uneven breathing. He spoke softly. Too softly. He said Shanann had taken the girls to a friend's house. He said they had an emotional talk. He said he didn't know where they were. But something felt off. Inside the house, Shannon's purse was still there. Her phone was wedged in the couch cushions. The girls' blankets were untouched. Her car was in the garage. There were no signs of a struggle, but there were also no signs she had planned to leave. Within hours, the missing persons case became something heavier. While this unfolded publicly, another thread was quietly tightening. Phone records show that the night before the murders, Chris and Nichol Kessinger had a phone call that lasted over an hour. It ended shortly before midnight. That detail has been widely discussed online. What was said during that call has never been publicly released in full. Investigators did question Kessinger. She admitted the affair. She said Chris told her he was separating. She said she had no idea he would harm his family. She described him as calm, attentive, loving. But as the case exploded in the media, she deleted messages between them. She searched news updates. She tried to distance herself. According to reports, she later cooperated with law enforcement and provided her phone for analysis. Officially, there is no evidence she knew about the murders in advance. But for online communities, that final long phone call became a focal point. Was it just two adults talking about their future? Or was it something more? Meanwhile, investigators began zeroing in on Chris. His story shifted. First, Shanann left. Then, under pressure, he claimed Shanann hurt the girls and he reacted in rage. Later, he admitted to killing all three. He led police to an oil site where their bodies were found. The case legally was sealed tight. But emotionally, for many, it was not. Because even as Chris confessed, some people couldn't stop asking about the woman on the other end of that late-night call. In the next chapter, we break down the investigation deeper. The plea deal, the lack of a full trial, the digital evidence that was and wasn't explored in court, and why some believe key questions were left unanswered. If you're following this case closely, like the video, comment your perspective, and subscribe to Crime Decoder. Share this breakdown with someone who thinks the story ends with a confession. Because sometimes, a closed case doesn't feel closed at all. The confession came fast. Too fast, some would later say. Within days of Shanann and her daughters being found at the Anadarko oil site, Chris Watts agreed to a plea deal. He admitted to murdering his pregnant wife and smothering Bella and Celeste. In exchange, the death penalty was taken off the table. There would be no trial, no drawn-out courtroom testimony, no cross-examinations, no public deep dive into every digital breadcrumb. Just a guilty plea. Life in prison without parole. Legally, the case was airtight. He confessed. He led investigators to the bodies. Physical evidence placed him at the scene. His changing stories destroyed his credibility. From a prosecution standpoint, there was little reason to gamble on a trial when the outcome was certain. But this is where public doubt found space to grow. Because without a trial, certain questions were never explored in open court. There was no moment where prosecutors laid out every text message between Chris and Nichol Kessinger for a jury. No dramatic timeline board mapping each phone ping and deleted search. No public testimony dissecting that 111-minute phone call the night before the murders. What investigators reviewed remained largely inside discovery files and interview transcripts. Official documents state that Kessinger cooperated. She met with detectives multiple times. She allowed access to her phone. She described her relationship with Chris in detail. Authorities said there was no evidence she had prior knowledge of the murders or participated in them. And that matters. But online communities focused on what wasn't seen, not what was stated. Some questioned why certain phone data appeared incomplete. Others pointed to deleted messages and internet searches that felt uncomfortable, even if not criminal. There were debates about cell tower pings, about the speed of the plea deal, about whether investigators stopped digging once Chris confessed. Law enforcement has consistently maintained that there was no evidence tying Kessinger to the crime itself. No charges were filed. No arrest was made. From a legal standpoint, that is clear. Yet speculation doesn't operate on legal standards. It feeds on uncertainty. When someone deletes messages during a high-profile murder investigation, even if done out of panic, it raises eyebrows. When a case closes quickly, people wonder what might still be hidden. And when the internet gets hold of thousands of pages of discovery documents, armchair investigators begin connecting dots, sometimes responsibly, sometimes recklessly. Over time, Kessinger disappeared from public view. Reports suggest she sought privacy, even a new identity, after facing intense backlash and threats. Whether fair or not, the spotlight on her never fully dimmed online. The law says Chris Watts acted alone. But for a portion of the public, the emotional verdict feels unfinished. In the final chapter, we'll look at the aftermath, how the families live with the loss, how the community remembers Shanann, Bella, and Celeste, and why this case still sparks debate years later. If you've made it this far, like the video, share it, and drop your thoughts below. Subscribe to Crime Decoder and turn on notifications. Because the final chapter isn't about rumor. It's about impact. The courtroom was silent when the sentence was read. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. 3 consecutive life sentences plus additional years. No appeals that would bring him home. No second chance at freedom. Chris Watts was transferred to a maximum security prison in Wisconsin, where he remains today. Legally, the system had spoken. But outside the courtroom, the grief was louder than any verdict. Shannon's family stood shattered yet composed. They spoke about forgiveness, about faith, about choosing not to let hatred consume what little peace they had left. They remembered Shanann as vibrant and driven. They remembered Bella's gentle heart, Celeste's wild energy, the baby boy who would never be born. 3 small coffins, 1 unborn child, an entire future erased. The community held vigils. Purple ribbons fluttered in the Colorado wind. Strangers left flowers on a quiet suburban street that would forever carry a shadow. For many, this case became more than a headline. It became a symbol of how evil can hide behind normalcy. And still, years later, the questions haven't fully stopped. Online forums continue to dissect timelines. Documentaries revisit the evidence. Podcasts replay interviews. The name Nichol Kessinger resurfaces again and again in comment sections, often accompanied by suspicion, sometimes by defense, always by debate. It's important to say this clearly. No court has found her guilty of any crime related to the murders. Law enforcement has stated there was no evidence that she participated in the killings. The only person convicted in this case is Chris Watts. But the speed of the plea deal left some people feeling like they never saw the entire puzzle assembled in public view. Without a trial, there was no full courtroom narrative, no exhaustive public examination of every rumor. The legal process closed the case. The internet never did. Maybe that's the real reason this story lingers. Not because the facts are unclear, but because the emotions are unresolved. A smiling husband on television, a secret affair, a confession that came in pieces, deleted messages, late-night calls, and 4 lives lost in a single night. Some see a straightforward case of a family annihilator acting alone. Others see gaps that still bother them. But at the center of all the noise, all the theories, all the speculation, there are 3 children and a mother who never came home. And that is the part that should never be forgotten. So now I want to ask you, do you believe this case was fully explored, or do you think there are still unanswered questions that deserve another look? Comment below, let's talk about it respectfully. If this breakdown gave you new insight like this video, share it with someone who followed the Watts case, and subscribe to Crime Decoder. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next deep dive.